What's up, everybody? Brian Tong here. Welcome to the Apple Bitz XL for everything good and bad inside the world of Apple. Okay, everyone has been asking for me to make a video version of this podcast along with the audio version. Look, sometimes I'm on the road, and if you're watching right now, you are seeing where Brian Tong grew up. If you're not, and you're just listening, you missed out. But special guest two, join me in my bedroom as a young child. KTLA's Rich DeMuro, tech reporter extraordinaire. Rich, what's up, dude?
Hey, that sounds really bad, but I just imagine you and I chatting about like all kinds of geeky stuff like Jurassic Park and like, you know, all your Star Wars memorabilia as kids.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's some Star Wars on the other side. I've got literally every Spawn toy that came out. I've got a Star Wars poster. I got some NBA. Oh, here, I'm gonna move. See that little collage there, Rich?
Yeah.
That was before Photoshop existed. That was handmade. I cut out magazine clippings of Chris Webber, my favorite player from junior high all the way through high school, and I made a handmade.
Wow.
Collage.
This was before AI you could just ask for, you know, whatever you wanted. But here's the thing. I mean, my parents moved after, you know, like the house I grew up in, they're not in anymore.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad that I don't have that excitement. I would come home during college and like go through old boxes in my room of like all these little, you know, knickknacks and memorabilia that I kept over the years. So it's definitely fun. It brings you right back. So kind of cool.
It is super nostalgic, and you know, it makes me laugh because it's literally, this is like my high school room, and it's pretty clear.
It's a snapshot in history of young Brian Tong.
So good. So, okay, Rich, you know, thanks so much for joining us. Did you want to kind of tell people really quickly where they can find you? Also, I mean, you are hosting your own tech radio show, so please just let's get into a little bit. Yeah. Tell people what you're up to. I
love it. Okay. And you've been a guest, by the way, on the radio show. So, it airs on the, Premier Network. So on iHeartRadio stations, if you're in Los Angeles, it's on KFI AM 640 Saturdays from 11 to 2. It's called Rich on Tech, super easy name. And it actually airs across the nation, which is kind of fun. I don't know why they handed me the keys to this, but it's been a great show. It's every Saturday. And of course, you can get the podcast after. Just go to richontech.tv. And my social is @richontech. So enough about me. Let's talk about tech.
All right, let's get into it. Okay, so this is the Apple Bitz XL. So we're going to talk Apple, but we're also going to talk about another event that you and I were at. But I think the big news that kind of flew a little bit under the radar just because there's been so much tech news happening is Apple announced their recent earnings for the quarter. And guess what? Apple isn't necessarily immune to some of the economic slowdown that has happened across the industry. Rich, I know you have some kind of numbers just to give people a general idea of, you know, maybe earnings wise, how they're down and even in the different product categories.
Yeah. So iPhone down 8% year over year. Mac down 29% year over year, iPad up 30% year over year, which I think is really telling about a couple things. And then wearables, home, and accessories down 8% year over year. So
and that's just for the quarter.
That's for the quarter, right? Yeah. So that's Q1. So I think in general, you know, it's one of these things that, like you said, nobody is immune to the changes that we've seen. But at the same time, these companies were coming off such a high during the pandemic. I mean, we're on Zoom right now. And it's like, remember, I mean, Zoom was like everything, you know, 6 months ago or a year ago. And at this point, you know, I use it a couple of times a month, you know, versus like several times a day. Mm-hmm. So it's just, you know, I think Apple actually, well, I don't know. I don't know if they fared that well, but the iPads being up, I think, is interesting because people still want that experience of having a nice sort of, you know, device that they can do a lot on, but maybe it's not as expensive as a full laptop.
Yeah, you know, I think you make an interesting point because I'm surprised that iPad revenue was up. Just to give you an idea, because you talked about how iPhone was roughly 8% down, correct? So let me just at least give people an actual number. They brought in $65 billion this quarter versus the 68 they expected. So that's typically their target number. But you know, you did talk about how they're year over year down. iPad revenue, from a standpoint of how big the iPhone is compared to the iPad revenue this quarter was 9.4 billion. So you're looking at iPhone revenue, which is basically 7 times the amount of iPad. But to your point, the iPad showing some growth here that people, if you said, oh, Apple's down across the board, I don't think you would say, oh, I bet you the iPad category is up.
Right. Well, I'd also be curious about the services category, because I know that's a big area of growth for Apple. And I know myself, like I'm subscribed to the Apple One, which is like, $33 a month, which, that's a significant amount of money. I've got I've got Apple Fitness. They've got the cloud storage. So as people get more ingrained in this ecosystem and they subscribe to more Apple services, I think that that's a huge growth area for Apple, because you've got the iPhone and you've had it for years, and some people are very hesitant to pay for that cloud storage. They're looking for a way around it, or maybe they're using a different music service. But as they kind of make things more appealing to kind of consolidate, that growth could be there too. So I think that Apple is still, iPhone still generates a lot of the revenue at Apple. And I know that's very, very clear to a lot of people. But at the same time, I think they've done a really good job treading very carefully into these other businesses. I mean, they do. Look, you look around, AirPods are everywhere. You look around, Apple Watches are everywhere. iPad is the standard tablet. And so it's just a matter of kind of like making sure that the iPhone stays competitive and people still enjoy that experience and want to upgrade sooner than later. That's the other thing they're running into.
Also, whenever you see any stories, or you'll see these stupid hot takes where, let's say, even with economic conditions, Apple's iPhone sales are down a little bit, and you have the whole Apple's dead, Apple's going down. I'm going to tell everyone right now, every year you hear that. If the iPhone is like an S year where they just make improvements under the hood, which arguably totally refines that model, you hear, oh, it looks the same, they're going down. No. I'm sorry. You can. I've heard this for now, what, 15, 20 years. It hasn't happened because of the ecosystem and the user base that keeps it going.
Also, let's not forget that if you look at, IDC came out with the smartphone shipment numbers for last year. And yes, last year was down. I think it was the worst year, negative 18%. It was the worst year in many, many years. But let's not forget that Samsung sold 260 million phones, or shipped 260 million. Apple shipped 226 million. Now, those numbers used to be very different back in the day. Apple has really narrowed that gap between the top phone maker and them. So they're still shipping a lot of smartphones. People, overall, the thing I hear is people love their iPhones. There's really not a person that you meet that says, I don't like this, I just use it, just because they really enjoy using it. And I think that's a huge advantage for Apple in this device. But again, it's how do you make people want to upgrade sooner than later, because these things have gotten so good, people just keep delaying that upgrade for another year, another 6 months, another 12 months, whatever they need to fit their budget.
I think you've seen how they've tried to entice people to upgrade more with really aggressive upgrade deals now, right? Through carriers. Before it was like, I'm just going to hold on to my phone now. You're like, it only is going to cost me $200 or $300 to make that upgrade. And you're that person who just always wants to have the new. They make it a lot more enticing to upgrade. So, we'll keep an eye on that. But I also think when you talk about how Apple has gone into these other product categories and has really kind of slowly grown them and developed them, like you talk about, right? They have the Apple Watch, they have the AirPods. I think it's gonna be really interesting this year to see what happens with this rumored Apple headset. This is a category that is, quite honestly, still unproven to be a hit to the mainstream audience. Apple is getting into it, and this is going to be really interesting to see how strong the Apple ecosystem is and how much pull Apple is going to have, at least with this initial model, to generate buzz, potentially push the industry forward to make it more stream or not. The pricing that's been rumored is not a mainstream price at all, potentially $3,000, $2,000 to $3,000 for the headset. This is going to be one of Apple's biggest challenges, especially under the current economic conditions and an audience that has not shown, there was a phone audience. We knew people wanted headphones. There was a laptop audience. The iPad was maybe a riskier at the time, but this headset is the riskiest product that I think that they've ever entered into a market as long as I can remember.
I think it's risky at the beginning, but the absolute reality is that I believe in it in a big way. Like I believe that XR, mixed reality, whatever you want to call it, going forward, augmented, virtual, it will be a thing and someone will get it right. Mm-hmm. Apple has a very good chance of getting it right. Maybe not out of the gate, but Apple typically does things a little bit differently than everyone else. They also take a little bit more of a wait and see approach. And we've had virtual reality headsets on the market now for many, many years. But have they been to a place where they're useful, where there's that software you want to use with it? And from what I'm hearing about this, this Apple headset, it's going to be useful. And it's going to have that developer support. Apple has so many great software developers already making software for, the iPhone and the app and the iPad and, the Mac computers. So it's like a lot of that will just be adapted to this new headset. And I think that is going to really be key in getting this thing off the ground. And yeah, it's not going to be a hit this year, but in the future, I think Apple sees very big things for this because they can do it right and really do well with this.
Yeah, I've talked about it. It reminds me of the journey of the Apple Watch, where when it came out, the Apple Watch really did not nail it out of the gates, but over time, they saw how users really gravitated towards a few features, and it evolved into something completely different. Quite honestly, the new Watch OS changed as well. So I feel like the trajectory of the Apple headset might follow similar lines, just as they figure out what people use it for, and what will be the killer feature that we haven't seen. If it is really these true high definition displays, that makes it more immersive. Just that alone, you're already starting to get people's attention. Like, what are they going to do in their platform that at least is a little different than what we've seen, that even just moves VR and AR in general forward? I'm just curious to see that. So it'll be real interesting. Okay. Rich, I know MacBooks came out, Mac Minis came out, HomePod came out. They dropped it on us the week after CES. Thanks.
I know.
We appreciate that. We love it. But, we haven't had anyone here on the show to talk about their experience with the new MacBook Pro. I have an M1 Max. I think the M2 Max is incredible, but I'm good with my M1 Max. But you, my friend, did get a new M2 MacBook Pro. I'm not specifically sure if you got the M2 Pro or M2 Max, but I'd love to hear kind of your experience and what you're going through and what do you think about it right now?
All right. So I came from the MacBook Pro 2019 Intel, and I called that, I love that computer. It was fantastic. It was my first 16-inch MacBook Pro. I upgraded from I think a 13-inch MacBook Pro. And so I really love that computer. It was fantastic, but it got sort of slow towards the end. Like it was, it did everything I needed, but it wasn't so peppy. And so I knew that I didn't want to get the first generation of M1. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. Even though the reviews were phenomenal, I think Apple hit it out of the park with the first M1 chips, but I just wanted to sit and kind of wait because my computer was in a place where it was still okay. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, the day these M2s come out, I'm definitely going to get it. And so my biggest decision was really the 14 versus the 16 inch. The 16 inch MacBook Pro with the M2 is heavier than my old 16-inch MacBook Pro. And so I really, at the end, was like, do I really want a heavier computer? And so I went into the Apple store a bunch of times. I'm sitting there chatting with anyone who will talk to me about 14 versus 16. And I finally ended up getting the 14-inch, but I don't know. I might have to change it up for the 16.
Really?
Because okay, so the processor is phenomenal. I mean, this incredible thing, I got the standard. I'm so impatient that I couldn't wait for like a custom build where like I wanted the 32 gigs and I wanted the 2 terabytes.
Come on, Rich. This is for life, man. This is going to be a computer you have for a long time.
No, it trickles down to my kids after like a couple of years. It goes my bigger kid, little kid, and then my mom or dad. So they always get like my old stuff. Because these things, that's the other thing. It's like they're expensive, but they have such a lifetime. I mean, my dad is still using my old MacBook, which is, MacBook Pro, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so I just got what's off the shelf in the store, and Apple plays a couple games with you because they make you, if you really want like the 32 gigs out of the store, you got to go with the M2 Max, right? That's the high end one.
Yeah. You're saying so the options they have at the store, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They give you like the base model, a middle model, and then you got to spend a little bit more if you want to get like, some of the better stuff right out of the gate without waiting. You can customize to your heart's content online. But anyway, so I bought the computer. Everything's been great. The software today, when I had to, install Zoom on it, and that was the first time I've ran into like that Rosetta thing where it's like, hey, we want to run Intel software on your, Apple Silicon. So I felt like that just ruined the whole experience right there. I was like, this computer is going to go down to a crawl now because I've got this like non-native software running on it.
My bad, Rich. Sorry that we're
no, it wasn't you. I had a Zoom before you, so I had a 1-2 Zoom punch today for some reason. Anyway, but it's been fantastic. The computer is so fast. The battery life is just absolutely incredible coming from an Intel. I mean, I'm sitting here on a Zoom. My fan is not going. We've been on for 20 minutes, and I was on a Zoom before this, and I'm on a battery. I'm not on a plug, which I would have never done with my old computer, and it'd be whirring like crazy right now.
Yeah, I think I love, hearing someone that has been with an Intel, because that was my workhorse as well. But as you keep on using this machine, how quiet it is. I even said in my review, you can't even say the word quiet because it doesn't make a sound. No. It doesn't make a freaking sound. It's done it maybe twice for me because I had to push it really hard a couple times, but it's an amazing machine. So you've had it for how long now, Rich?
So I've had it for about a week, and so the main things I do on my computer, I video edit, which I'm not as like high end. I'm doing mostly like quick little things for TV and also for, social media. But it's very basic, not a lot of graphics and stuff, but just opening apps and Final Cut and all that. It just cranks through them. There's just nothing this computer can't do without like a hiccup or I mean, it just nothing phases it. Chrome runs faster. My exports are faster. And again, just I'm not a big fan of the notch. I'll be honest. It definitely bugs me a little bit that's up there. And the screen real estate, going from 14 or 16 to 14, it just sort of depends. Do you want something that's more compact and portable for travel? Like when I was up in San Francisco, I had this on my back, very easy to carry around. In fact, my backpack is so light, I feel like I'm missing my laptop. So every time I'm like checking in my backpack, there's no touch bar, which I really appreciate because I never wanted that at the beginning when I got my Intel, but it was like, if you wanted a certain level, it was like built in. Otherwise, it's fantastic. So I just have to decide. I've got a couple more days. This was the other thing I noticed, by the way. I don't know if you remember, Brian, but back in the day, when you bought a laptop from the Apple store, there would be a restocking fee if you returned it.
15%, if I can recall.
Yeah, I was looking at my old receipts, and I was like my last, a long time ago, it was like $160. Like it was like a certain percentage of the price, right? And so that's another testament to like, talk about Apple, like people, they have pros and cons about Apple, but I mean, that's pretty incredible that you can buy a $3,000 device and exchange or return it without any sort of worry within 14 days. I'm not even sure Best Buy does that. Maybe they do, but
the Best Buy fans are coming for you, Rich. The Geek Squad is coming for you. You better be careful, dude.
Do they have, I don't know, maybe, do they have restocking fees? I'm not sure. I mean,
maybe it depends on the high value item. You do have obviously a certain return period, but when I've returned stuff, I haven't had to pay a restocking fee. And I returned like a big ticket item maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. So I think they've been good about it too. I'm just showing some love. I think that's great. Yeah. That's good for the consumer though. I mean, I think that's really like back in the day, you always had like, there were so many catches for like all these little things. And now, I mean, even with the airlines, like I was on Southwest, and it's like the fact that you can just book and change things. Like, I don't know. I like the fact that when things are easier for the consumer, it really does make a difference because you feel like you can take that plunge, get that computer, or, take that flight, whatever, and not be super worried about, okay, what's the catch here? So are you keeping this machine? Because I'll tell you right now, going from as a video editor, I'm exactly where I wish I could take a 14-inch with me because it is way lighter, but for me, when I'm on the road editing, it just helps your eyes. I mean, maybe we're older. It just helps. You like seeing your video, larger screen real estate, a longer timeline. So you have a few days left. What are you going to do?
I have a few days left. I don't know. My wife is like, dude, she's like, I knew you were going to do this. It's like because I talked about which one I wanted for so long now. And then, of course, I put a poll on Twitter and I talked about it and this and that. But I don't know. I agree. I already adjusted the resolution on this machine to be smaller, which, of course, is tougher on your eyes. And so it's just one of those things. It's a trade-off. It's like, what do you value more? Do you want a machine that's compact and portable and lightweight, or do you want something that's more of a power user machine wherever you go? And I'm not one of those people that really plugs into a monitor. So, but the bottom line, those are my problems. But the reality is these systems are so good that I understand if you're coming from an M1, you probably don't need to upgrade. But anything before that, if you haven't experienced this whole, M2 or M1 situation, it's quite incredible. It almost feels like I think other computer makers are just going to have a real tough time catching up to this.
This is if there's an A+ grade, the MacBook Pro is an A++. It's everything, performance, battery life. Like that's the thing. A lot historically, we've had to trade off battery life and fan noise for performance. That's not happening here anymore. It's incredible. I think the only person that these machines don't make sense for, but it's really interesting because there's a next generation of a lot of these, is all my nieces and nephews, they want a game. They want a PC that can game. I don't know where your kids are at with that yet, but they're playing Valorant, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Roblox, they're playing all different types of games. Those are the main ones, but those games aren't on Mac. And even though the Mac does have the power to support some of those games, and it's not there. And so whenever all 5 of my nieces and nephews, they get it that a Mac is for creating content and it's easier to use and they see all the benefits. If you can't game on it, they don't want it. So it's really interesting to see this as they get older. I'm wondering, will they make a shift to Mac, or are they, because it's been so ingrained into how they've come up, is it more of a PC for them in the next 10 years? I don't know, but that's one thing that that's a hard nut for Apple to crack, because it takes developers who want to invest in the Mac platform. There's games like Resident Evil and No Man's Sky, which are now on the Mac, but it took like 2-3 years to get there, right? This is way after their console launch. We're not talking about AAA titles debuting at the same time. But it's not necessarily hurting Apple, but there's the biggest reason why someone doesn't get a Mac. Arguably the only reason that I know of is because you can't game on it.
Well, and look, if you're looking for a gaming PC, you might be spending more, but I think the other is the cost conscious consumer, that there are so many Windows laptops that are much more inexpensive. But the reality is, even if you're just, people think of these as like a creator's machine or like someone that's in the, creative field. But I would argue that I think anyone with that MacBook Air, even at that base price point, that is going to be an incredible system, because let's say you're spending, a lot of people want to spend $500 on a laptop. That's kind of like in their head, like that seems like a reasonable price. And the MacBook Air is like $1,000, maybe a little bit less for the
like $11.99.
Yeah. But the reality is that computer is going to last longer and perform better for longer than that $500 system that you're getting. And I think that people just discount that time frame of, well, how long is this computer going to be really good? Like the Windows computer will be fine, but it's going to be frustrating after a year or so, maybe 2 years, whatever. But the Mac is really, it's a great experience from like start to finish. Like the woman across from me at the Mac, at the Apple store, I got to tell this story real quick. She was upgrading from a computer that was, pretty old. I think it was like 10 years old or something. But, and so I was kind of like walking her through, and she was telling me what she does. She was looking at the 16-inch MacBook Pro. She's like, I love the screen. I'm like, ma'am, you're fine with this MacBook Air if you're telling me, like, she said she Zooms with her kids and like, checks her email. And I was like, I think you'll be fine on the MacBook Air. But anyway, the best line was she was getting her, she liked the help that she was getting there to like switch over all of her stuff, like migrate her data. And the guy was like, hey, do you use a Time Machine? Because that'll make life easier. She's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And he looks at it, he goes, well, Time Machine hasn't ran since 2013, so we might have to. She thought her computer was backed up, and I know he loved saying that, because like I was right within earshot, and I was like, I was dying. I was like, this is, because it's just, that's the average person. Like they see Time Machine in the toolbar and they think it's running, and they never check their backup, and it's like literally the last time it ran was a decade ago.
It's so true.
Anyway,
I mean,
I thought that was funny.
the thing is also, we as tech reporters, and when we cover this stuff, we we are in this world where it's like upgrade, 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 new thing, new thing, new thing. I really make it a point to try and ground myself in the brain thought of, look, would I love the new M2 Max MacBook Pro to make my performance a little faster than what it is? Yeah, of course I want the newest thing, but the actual consumer and like the rationale in my head has to say no, don't do it until you really, really feel it. Because I always think there's a point where sometimes a lot of tech influencers, they just upgrade no matter what, but that's not the real experience. That is not the general consumer's experience.
No, that is
at
not
all.
even close, actually.
Not even
I mean,
close at all, right?
my experience of keeping the Intel for 3 years, I actually felt guilty as someone who works in tech, and I was like, I should be upgrading, I should have this, but like that was closer to the real experience. And 3 years, that's not even a real cycle. Like for a lot of people, it might be, I mean,
5 plus,
way longer than
5
that.
plus.
Yeah, exactly.
Easily.
And do the math on a 5 plus. If you're getting a MacBook Air, let's say, and you're spending let's just say $1,200. I mean, you really keep that. I say 4 to 5 years. I mean, let's just say college for a student. I mean, do the math on that. It's not that bad of a deal. And I get it. It's a lot of money up front. Like if you're thinking about it as the price you're paying that day, but you really have to look at the long term of these things and the frustration factor of, you can spend $300 on a Chromebook or $200, but it's just not going to be fun after a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall experience with the MacBook Pro, thumbs up, you're high on it, like you loving it?
I think it's incredible. I think that I'm a power user, obviously, maybe not to the extent of what you're doing on your computer, but I call my computer the moneymaker. I really, because it truly, like, you carry it everywhere. It does everything. It is your companion in this world that helps you get things done. And so when I sit there and like spend money on a new computer, I feel good about it because this is what enables me to do what I do. And if you're wondering, like, what should I get? Should I get this? Is it the right time? I think that Apple being able to control everything from the software to the hardware to the chip, they have just made incredible strides that it's like the iPhone. I mean, it's the iPhone, but a computer. The iPhone is so great because they've made everything so efficient on that device. And it's kind of the same thing, but in a laptop form. And that was their dream, I think.
Yep. I mean, this has been just building this chip line out has been in the works for like 10 years. They talked about when they were developing the chips for the iPhone, that was obviously their roadmap to eventually get to the point where they could put them in a laptop, and it, I don't want to promote it, but in Apple's MacBook Pro promo, I didn't know they were going to use it, but I said it honestly at the time. I said, they just changed the game. And it was true. Like, I don't say that stuff just cause, right?
But you're right, they did. And it's a big deal to waver from like these trusted big names like AMD and Intel in the chip world, because that's what people know. Those have been, Intel Inside has been advertised for forever and ever and ever. And that was brilliant marketing, because it's like, well, if it doesn't have Intel inside, like, should I really trust this thing? But the fact is, I think that just Apple has done a really nice job of making this work incredibly well. And I'm not even sure people, like the average person who's shopping for a computer, sort of realizes that just yet. Like they switched their own. Oh, that's interesting. Is it as good? Like, no, it's way good.
Yeah. Before we move on, you made me remember, Intel Inside. Most of us at least can remember the chime, the dung 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 dung. And I remember there was a time where Apple was using their own Power PC chip.
Yep.
And Intel would decimate Apple with, like, no one wanted an Apple chip in their computer. Apple would always have to talk about the processor's pipeline, of how their pipeline to do tasks what allowed them to kind of, it was a shorter pipeline, I believe. It was either shorter or longer. I mean, this has been so long, but ultimately they were trying to make a comparison like, hey, our processors are just as good. No one cared. Intel was what you wanted. Then AMD rose. And so it's so interesting to see the evolution of this. Like, now Intel's like, okay, well, we need to change our architecture to match what Apple is doing, right? That they're going back to the drawing board, and they're revamping, and they're pushing the power. But not yet the efficiency. And Apple's not even trying to be. Apple's chips are so good. They're not trying to be they could make it the most powerful chip and our fans could be going on all the time, but they're trying to make it powerful and efficient. And that's this balance that is consumer friendly, that makes sense to a consumer, not someone who just wants to say, I've got the buffest machine. Well, how loud is your fan? How many battery hours do you get? So it's
and also don't forget, we're going to talk about Samsung too, but you've got Qualcomm coming up here too, which, they're making a big kind of jump and dive into this world of like, they've taken what they've learned from mobile and now they're applying it to like these systems that are almost a mix between a mobile computing platform and a laptop, because let's face it, not everyone needs the full-on, ability to edit video or to do this. And I'm sure you can with these chips that Qualcomm's doing, but most people just want something that's really easy, simple, lightweight, fast, and the battery lasts a long time. I mean, if you're doing email and spreadsheets and presentations, that's really what you need. And so they're coming up too. And we saw Samsung announce their laptops had some Qualcomm stuff in them. So that's another place to watch as well.
Okay, we'll jump back to them in a quick moment, but let's talk HomePod. HomePod, a really interesting release from Apple. Looks about the same as the previous HomePod. For people that haven't seen my review, I went deep in it. I gave you guys and gals
you did a great job.
Audio samples, so you can hear for yourselves. I come to my own conclusions. I let you decide for yourself. I knew right out of the gates when I first listened to it, I could tell it sounded different. It didn't feel like it sounded as full, as well-rounded. I'm not even a bass-heavy guy. But from an audio standpoint, I can say confidently for me, and again, people hear differently. People have different sound preferences. But I think generally most people, if you listen to these things side by side and I put them in stereo pair, the new HomePod doesn't sound as good as the original HomePod. These are more than just sound, but the HomePod itself has kind of been championed as like a really good sounding speaker, and it still is. It's just that I lean towards the original HomePod. So I'm just kind of curious. We're going to talk about more than just its sound, but what did you think about the new HomePod?
I mean, look, I texted you when I set this thing up. I said, Brian, I don't know what the term is because I'm not an audiophile, but I hear this stuff. I've tested all these speakers since, not in a way like you did with those little fake rubber ears that you've got.
I'll tell you more about it in a sec, but keep going.
Those are wild. But, I just listen to these things and have my personal preferences. I mean, when the Google Nest, like their little kind of bigger speaker came out, like I thought that sounded pretty good for like how cheap it was. The Amazon devices sound pretty good for how inexpensive they are. And I think what people want is, again, they want something that's inexpensive, but room filling that sounds more premium than the price you paid. And the HomePod kind of flips that on its side. It's an expensive speaker, and we're talking like Sonos level prices. But I think the first HomePod sounded incredible. And when I plugged in the second one and listened to it, I just felt like I had a setting off. I was like, wait a second, something's off here, because it sounded a little tinny to me. Like it was almost like I needed to adjust something. And I said, there's no way. And that's when I texted you and you were like, I kind of came to the same conclusion. And look, I think if you're in just setting this thing up in your house and you don't really have much to compare it to, I think you'll be fine. I think there's other aspects to it that people obviously will like, but the HomePod first generation definitely sounded better. And I'm not sure if this is something they can fix with a software update or tuning. But that's where I stand.
Yeah. And again, like I always have disclaimer. Some people are like this sounds better than that. We do have preferences of what we like. And when we talked about it sounding tinny, it just didn't sound as well-rounded. The original HomePod has detail in the highs, the mids, and the lows. The new HomePod definitely has an emphasis on the high, on the mids. The voices sound really clear and in the front, but you feel like you're losing everything else a little bit. And to your point, this is based on computational audio. So I think I would not be surprised in a month or two if the new HomePod sounds a little different. I wouldn't be surprised.
I would not be surprised at all.
Right. Now, generally, reviews are like, this sounds great. And like we said, if you just set this thing up by itself and you have no point of reference, this thing sounds phenomenal.
Of course,
It's just that when you hear something that's more, I'm making up a word, phenomenal or you're like, wow. And it kind of speaks to how good the original HomePod was and how fine-tuned it was. It has 2 more tweeters, it has 2 more mics. But even just from a hardware standpoint, having 2 less tweeters, 5 versus 7, that's got to change the sound composition to somewhat of a degree. I don't think you can just take 2 tweeters out and just be like, it's going to sound exactly the same. So, it's going to be interesting to see the new HomePod, right? People were saying, hey, can you do head-to-head HomePod 1 versus HomePod 2? And I did. They're like, do it through Apple Music. Well, honestly, I did. I just didn't want my review to be an extra 30 minutes, but I tested everything. And even if it was spatial audio through Apple Music, HomePod 1 to HomePod 2, I came to the same conclusion. Not only did my fiance, who was blindfolded for the test, came to the same conclusion. And the audio samples that you listen to, and even that you personally, Rich, in your own home listen to, came to that same conclusion. So
and it was a quick conclusion too. So it's not like, I don't feel like it's this like, hold on, let me hear this song, let me hear that, hold on, let me just like one more time. Like, no, every single time. I came home the other day and I just, I said like, H Siri, like play some, music, and it was like, okay, oh wow, that even did it. Oh great, here we go.
You're in the Apple ecosystem, baby.
Yeah. And and I use a Sonos system, and that it sort of like fills the room. It just has this like certain feeling to it that I feel like the original HomePod definitely had. In fact, I think the original HomePod was maybe mistimed. It came at a time where it was so much more expensive than all of these cheap smart speakers that came out. And so when people saw it, like even the most dedicated Apple folks were like, I don't know, like I'll deal with this Echo, that's like $99. That sounds pretty good. And, I'll just wait and see. And then they came out that $99 HomePod Mini, which also sounded incredible. Mm-hmm. And now you have this one that's $299. So they're back up to that higher price point. And it looks great. If you have an Apple TV, it's like, to pair it with an Apple TV, it's like a really cool system. But again, I just feel like they need to tweak something that makes this feel a little bit warmer, a little bit richer, and more room filling than kind of right now. It just sounds a little, I don't know what the term is, tinny?
It's a little emptier, They're
a little empty, right?
The word that also I use when I first heard, I always thought it was cheesy, but people that know, I feel like the original HomePod has presence.
Yes,
it feels like you're in. It feels like you're in there, and that's the best way I can describe that specific speaker and how it makes me feel. Where the new HomePod feels like, oh, it's a speaker over there. I can tell it's a speaker over there.
Yep.
The new HomePod is like, you are in it. It's like, it's kind of penetrating you in a way. It just does something different. So, I think you made a great point, and I talked about this point in my review as well. The timing can be everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if this new HomePod does pretty well. I would expect it actually to do better than the first generation HomePod, purely because of timing. I think a lot of people that are looking at this HomePod are people that came into the Apple ecosystem smart home world, which it was still also that still is figuring itself out. But the Mini was really the product that changed the market, kind of the market share of Apple, giving them a large, close to something like 10% market share for smart speakers, where for the longest time during the era of Echo and Google, Amazon was somewhere around like 70% at one time. Really high, dominating. Google was around like 25. But the fact that Apple took up, shifted 5% in a market is pretty significant. It at least showed that they made some inroads. And so I know that there's many owners that are like, okay, I do want a better sounding HomePod now. I think that's going to help. And then to your point, the timing of it all, maybe people are willing to give Apple's ecosystem a new try. There's plenty of people who missed out on the first HomePod that just now feel like they want to get a full-size HomePod. And again, it's going to sound really good. But Rich and I are telling you, the OG HomePod sounds really good.
Yeah. But here's the other thing. So a couple other things about the HomePod. Number one, they fixed some of the things that we didn't like about the first one, which is the cable. The cable was non-removable on the original. And I remember when people asked like why, and they like gave some answer that like is typical Apple to like say like, oh, we can't make it removable. Of course, now they did. And it's a good design. Like the way they made it removable, it's like nice. And so that works really well. So I think people appreciate that. I think that the other thing that is a downside of it is they talk about how you can access some of these other music services. And I think that Apple Music has definitely grown in subscribership since the original. So I think that that's good going forward as well. But Spotify is still not native on this device. And so, yes, you can AirPlay to your heart's content, and you could probably even group them up and do all that stuff if you need to. But that's not going to be an ideal situation if you're a Spotify user. And some people are going to discover that the hard way once they purchase it. Some people, if they do a little bit more research, will realize like, wait a second, like I know they say you can do Spotify, but that's not really the case in an easy, clean way. So, pros and cons for this thing.
Those are really good points. I think also what I talked about is from a smart home support device, the Matter platform is now rolling out. There are more devices compatible with HomePod, but all the big players, Amazon and Google, are part of this Matter consortium and group that is collaborating, but none of the Google Nest products are still able to talk to HomePod yet. None of, like, when I say none, I'm saying the Nest thermostat, the Nest cameras. You know how many people have those? A lot.
Oh yeah.
A lot.
Oh yeah. It's like OG. That was like,
yes.
Those are like the original. Those are like the two things that are just in my house that are still like the original smart home devices I got is the cameras and the Nest and the thermostat. And so, but this Matter thing is huge, by the way, because this is really like, it's going to change everything when it comes. It's like all the smart home stuff was like siloed at the beginning. And now the fact that it's finally all coming together and like the makers realize like, let's make this better for everyone. I think that is going to be a huge win for consumers as well.
Yeah. So as that continues to get the support rolled out, I think that's going to help Apple a lot, quite honestly. And so we'll see. Do you personally have any reason to get a new HomePod, or you're good with where you're at right now?
I'm good. I have Sonos throughout the house, and so
we didn't even talk about Sonos. Sonos is a major.
I know.
Like they became the Apple of the speaker ecosystem. Quite honestly,
they did. But the problem is their voice control to me is not very good. It's actually horrible. So, like I came home yesterday, and this is kind of testing stuff. I came home and I said to the HomePod, like, just play me some music. I didn't even say what kind. And it just said like, oh, here's something you'll like. And it was just perfect. And then I said to the Sonos, I said like, and I don't even know what the phrase is. I think you said like, hey, Sonos or whatever it is. And it only works with like Amazon Music. And I forget what the other one is, but I'm not a subscriber. And so I called out like an Amazon specific playlist and it was like, I am sorry, I don't know that one. I'm like, really? And so I just got frustrated. I went to the app, and I think that's the biggest downside. I don't think a lot of like mainstream consumers are looking at Sonos because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where like if you built your collection up over the years, like I have, it's just kind of a nice thing. It works in every room. I've got my sound bar, and so. But with all that said, I think again the HomePod is positioned in this place where it's super easy, and since it plays nicely with your iPhone and an Apple TV, if you're in that world, it's a really nice purchase that like, oh, I've got great sound. And if I want to get two of these, if I want to get crazy and spend $600, like I've got really, really good sound in my main room. Plus I can get minis in all the other rooms. So I think that, they have a chance now because people are like, oh, Apple's putting some juice behind this.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think they do need to make one, and I'd be really intrigued by it. I think they need to make something even above the HomePod, a screen HomePod, like a Nest, Google Nest with a screen and a speaker. And as Apple's Matter platform gets all this more compatibility, then they can really start giving us some sort of really nice touchscreen layout to control.
What about a dock? Like, how Google's coming out with that Pixel like dock? What about? I mean, they already have the iPad. That's really all you need.
Absolutely, I'm on board. When I saw that was genius.
Yeah, it is genius. And I think that if anyone's, look, a HomePod speaker, what would they call it? Home base?
Maybe.
I'm just saying, you pop it in and
HomePod it's Ultra. Like, Rich, come on. HomePod Pro.
But here's the thing. They can even make a play for, how eco-friendly it is. Because you take your old iPad and you recycle it they can sell like it can accommodate like all the old iPads. And so you slip it in this thing and it's like a dock cradle, whatever you want to call it. And now you've just recycled your old iPad into a photo frame when it's not in use. You have your iCloud photos and you've got the software that, controls your house. I'm just saying, I don't work for Apple, but I don't know. Maybe I should.
I think there would be, quite honestly, a lot of excitement around a product like that for Apple, for the home.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
And if it came at the right time with the launch of like, okay, here's our new UI for the home using your iPad, matters good. So like now 90% of the smart devices that are out there are going to be ready to roll and work right out of the gates. Now you're you're convincing me to really now say, okay, I think I could move off of Google Nest or the Amazon ecosystem and now buy into Apple. That's what.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. That's a missing piece right now. And I think a lot of people are in, sort of our boat where it's like, you've got a fragmented reality of like, okay, well, I like the Nest because it's got my Google photo collection. I like, my iPhone because it's got this on it. I like the Apple TV because it's simple and it's like clean, but then people like the Echo because they're cheap. So, I mean, it's like, you've got this whole like, fragmented thing, which is great. I don't think that you need to have like everything the same, but I'm just saying like Apple coming in with a product like that could really make an impact because so many people have iPads. This thing charges your iPad. It sits in there all day, kind of like with the Pixel. I mean, it's not like a new idea I'm having here, but for Apple, it really makes a lot of sense because there's so many iPads out there and they're just sitting on tables being charged when they're not in use. Why not make this a dock that charges it and controls your home? I think it's if they're not working on it, I would be very, very surprised at this point.
If they're not, they can send all royalties forward to the Rich and Brian podcast, and we will be gladly. We're totally down to share that.
We'll divvy it up.
Yeah, the Apple's watching everything we do. Okay, they are. Okay, so let's shift off Apple because you and I got together in San Francisco. I love this. We see each. I see you more than some of my friends growing up because we're always at tech events, which I mean, we're friends, but it's funny, right? I see you more than some of my closest friends growing up. But we were both at San Francisco for Samsung Unpacked. So I thought they did some really cool things. So I kind of wanted to hear your experience and what you thought. The new S23 lineup, the flagship is the S23 Ultra, and then a new Ultra laptop from Samsung, which I thought was kind of pretty intriguing. So I'm going to let you kind of spit on that.
I mean, look, I think that, oh gosh, I don't know where to start. I mean, I think that Samsung played it really safe this year with their phones. I mean, it was the 200 megapixel camera on the S23 Ultra, like great. And I am, I have the phone, so I've been using it and testing it. And I will say, I do think that the camera, like I took a video of my kid last night, I took two things last night. I took a low light picture that I've taken at my dinner table, like a lot. I just take like a picture of the family eating dinner and like I test all the phones with that picture. And then I took a little video of my kid, and I'm not kidding. Both of those pictures look like the best I've ever seen out of a Samsung, and quite honestly, like rivaling what the iPhone will do. And so I think that they definitely did a good job with the camera. I'm still testing that aspect of it, but it's different than iPhone. iPhone is just a different beast altogether. It's this thing that has become such an ingrained part of people's lives. I don't really think there's a lot of people sitting there going, oh my gosh, I should switch to a Samsung. And for Samsung folks, I think that, part of it is if you need a new phone, like it does a cool new thing or it's got a new upgrade, whatever. But the reality is the downside, I think, that Samsung is running up against is Apple's iPhone does so many things. Like you've got the Apple Watch, which is super slickly integrated with the iPhone. And now you've got this whole idea of like the car crash detection and the satellite response. I mean, those three things, Apple Watch, car crash, satellite SOS, are like three huge features that I don't think the Android ecosystem has just yet. I mean, yes, the Pixel has the car crash stuff, but I don't know. It'd be hard. It'd be tough for me to switch and be like, oh, I'm going to give up like the ability to have satellite connectivity anywhere in the US if I'm ever stranded for this phone that like may take better pictures in certain circumstances or, whatever.
Well, when you talk about the Samsung S23 Ultra taking better photos, it definitely does because the actual processor, the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, has better and more powerful photo AI processing. I haven't been able to see it because I alluded to this earlier, Rich, but I did go to the event, but they did not bring a phone for me.
What I find that so funny because I talked to a couple people there that were like, oh, they're looking for a sample. Like, I feel like some of these companies give out sample devices like candy to some people. Like, the gift from Google. Have you ever seen that hashtag?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've been a part of that hashtag.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, yeah, it's look, it is first world problems, but I will just say as a creator who goes out to these things, and it part of the reason why we put like we pay for our own way to go out there and stay there and cover it, which is fine. It's part of what we do. But it's also because we're investing that because we're like, oh, we're going to come back with the device. And
yeah,
then
you're going to be first to have this thing.
Yeah.
That
right.
you
Start
can get yeah, exactly. Like I mean, and it's, that is a valuable thing because people, I mean, these companies put us in a position or put consumers in a position where they do these splashy events, they get all this buzz, and then they've got this pre-order window until, the certain day when you can get the phone. And so consumers, and by the way, the prices are better during that pre-order time. So consumers have this kind of like, it's going to be an extra $150 if I don't order it now. And that's why they need people like you and I to like have hands-on with these things to let people know, like, here's what I'm thinking. Like for this phone, I'll be honest, like after, 3 days with it, I can tell you that it's a solid upgrade. Like it's a fantastic, like just the sides of the phone alone, the fact that they made this easier to grip in your hand is like phenomenal to me. Now I get it. You're going to put a case on, but that case is going to be more squared off on the edges. It's going to be a more comfortable phone. This is a big phone. These Samsung, the S23 Plus and the Ultra are big, big phones. Anyway, so the point is, I think the buzz that I'm seeing from everyone that has the device right now is saying like the same thing. Like these pictures are looking pretty good. Like these videos are looking pretty good. And so I think that's important to have them early, like you said. And so anyway, I think it's a disservice that Samsung did not find one for you.
It's okay. It happens. I'll eventually get to it. I mean, I have plenty of other things to cover. It was just a bummer, but I didn't tweet about it because I always feel like it's weird when there's stuff that's like inside baseball that who cares? Like, well, right? Move on with like
Brian's crying again because he didn't get a sample unit like first. But I see it all the time. I mean, I see it all the time. People, I mean, and it's so easy to do that when you have a large following to like kind of push these companies to like, sway in your favor. But I don't know. It's like you take the good, you take the bad. I mean, you get all this Apple stuff that I don't get. Like, I'm not sitting there crying like when Apple doesn't, like I wanted a M2 laptop to test out before I bought it, but I didn't get that. You got like they sent you like one in every color.
Come on, man. That's not true. That's not true. Rich, I'm just gonna taunt you every time. Like, got my new M2 MacBook Pro. Hey, Rich, how are you doing? Every time. No, I'm just kidding.
Like, I'm still paying mine off.
Yeah. But I really think they pushed a lot about using this as a legitimate creator tool because we've seen, right? The people that got early access to a lot of these devices are people that are using them to at their high potential, right? Content creators, we know how big of a deal. Look, even young people, my nieces and nephews, and they're like friends. The fact that they have an uncle who has a YouTube channel is like cool to them, right? Luckily, I'm cool to them, but that's something that from the top, even as a grown person, it's fun to be able to create content. It's a lot of work, but these are the people that really do have influence on how these devices are perceived. And so what I find interesting is that, look, you sometimes bring baggage to different platforms, any platform. Samsung for the longest time has had baggage like, oh, their photos are overexposed. They don't look as natural. They boost the saturation. They're not as good as Apple photos. Well, guess what? This new phone, people are now saying, whoa, this looks just like a picture from my iPhone. Like they're saying those things. And that's what's important to get them into these people's hands. So then the general consumer's like, okay, I'm not jealous about the iPhone anymore. I've been in Samsung's ecosystem. I'm staying. Because to me, the biggest thing is all those features you mentioned that Samsung doesn't have. It's more about keeping people in your ecosystem than having them leave and lose that customer for 5 to 10 to forever, right?
That's a great point. I didn't think about it from that reverse point. You're right. Because it's like a lot of the people that I get emails from are like, hey, Rich, I've been a Samsung person for a long time. Like, and let's be honest, there's usually like the way it works, at least here, I guess it's different because like in LA, it's like iPhone is king, right? There is like literally iPhone, California, let's say.
Yeah.
But when you travel outside, and I'm not talking the world, I'm talking like just go to like Phoenix or go to Dallas, like I immediately see more Android, and I love it. It's like kind of refreshing. I'm like, okay, like it's a little check to realize that like there's a lot of different people in this world that, have different use case scenarios. But again, I didn't think about it that way of like, yeah, Samsung needs to keep these people in their world and continue to evolve these phones to make sure that they don't deflect to Apple. And then once they're in that Apple world, their friends are like, oh, cool. Now you're on the blue bubble, bandwagon. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about this event too is that I actually thought there was a big misstep on Apple's point or on Samsung's point. The whole like celebrity director thing with these phones, like they made a big deal at this event. They enlisted like 2 major directors to like use these phones to shoot everything for not only the event, but also they made like their own creations. And quite honestly, I thought that was a misstep because yes, I get it. Like you put a $600 lighting gimbal and these filters and, stabilizers and a crew and all this stuff. But like grandma has got a shaky hand and she's taking a picture with this phone, at a kid's birthday party. Like, let's see how it performs in that aspect. And that is arguably more important. And I'm making a joke, but that's like the reality of it. And Rich, so I thought,
go ahead. No, finish your thought. Sorry.
No, I just think they did themselves a disservice because I'm sorry, but I don't care what these directors in Hollywood are doing. Like I want a good picture at my kid's birthday party. And that's the reality. And that's where it needs to perform. And I think that what has made Apple so amazing is like prosumers are using this device to like, we shoot stuff for TV on the iPhone. But at the same time, that anyone can pick up an iPhone and take a really good picture in like a split second. And that's what I need to know about this new phone.
That's a great point. And it's just not the sexiest thing, right? Hey guys, like, could you imagine a company branding, your grandma can take great photos versus like Ridley Scott, director of
it might be refreshing. I think this would be a great marketing campaign. It's just regular people taking. Actually, you know what? Apple's already done it. Don't they do that like billboard campaign where they put like they blow up
shot on
pictures?
Hashtag shot on iPhone is Samsung doesn't have a campaign like that where people rally around it. And the fact that Apple put them on billboards, it's like how about this? Yeah. I could you and I could potentially get a photo on a billboard that has apples and that's cool. And
they should do where the next campaign should be where someone takes a cool picture on the iPhone or video. They send it to someone on an Android. It comes through with like a like a postage stamp, and then they blow that up on the billboard.
Hey, you know what? Samsung, remember they didn't really push it as hard this year, but and I really feel it hasn't resonated with consumers. And I swear to you, when Apple puts a better optical zoom in their camera, everyone's going to freak out.
Oh,
Samsung has a 10x optical.
10x zoom. It's incredible.
It's incredible.
It's an incredible tool to have. And again, I go back to that kid at the play. Your kid is in the play. You didn't get the front row. You're 20, 30 rows back. And just having that ability to zoom in optically 10 times, everyone, when you're at any sort of event, if you watch people at a concert, any sort of seated event or whatever, entertainment, they're always pinching to zoom on their iPhone and they get past that optical zoom in about 2 seconds and they're in like 10, 15x with a digital zoom and it's horrible. And so, yes, having that 10 times, I don't even think you need like the 30x or the 100x, but that 10x is pretty incredible to have. And nobody's really talked about it.
I just don't get, I remember last year or 2 years ago, they really went all in on space photography, right? Shoot the moon. And it looked cool, but how many people are going to shoot the moon all the time? Come on.
How many times are you going to do that? You do it once in a while just for fun. And it is incredible, but it's unnecessary.
And so I already know this is going to happen. And it's, I love tech. Yes, we are in the Apple ecosystem, but you and I have been covering tech for like a majority of our lives now. And it pains me to know that this is a legitimate competitive feature advantage that when Apple does it, people are going to go. Apple might even do a 5X. Apple might even do 5X optical. They're going to go crazy. And I'm
excited when the Pro Max went from like 2.5 to 3X, weren't you? Wasn't that?
I was like, good. I was like, I was happy, but it's not like I've gone to basketball games and using a Galaxy Ultra phone, and it's just like, this is incredible.
It's a game changer, and it's one of those things that it's also, don't forget, it's on the Ultra, so that's a very expensive phone.
Yeah.
But you have to think on the flip side, people with the iPhone, a lot of folks are getting just the standard model, which, I don't know, what does the iPhone have? The iPhone 14, is that like a?
It's like a 2. It's either a 2 or a 2.5
Okay.
optical, but it's
That's
not more
not
than
much.
No,
Yeah.
no,
And
it's
then,
not.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't have, hold on. It only has two lenses. It's got the wide angle
Yep.
and then the regular. So it's not even.
Well, yeah, you're right. It has the wide. It doesn't have the ultra wide on the.
Oh, it doesn't have ultra wide. Okay, so it has one telephoto lens. Okay,
Yes,
I should know this stuff covering tech.
There's so many things, dude. Honestly, it depends on the day. There's so many things that are thrown at us. Our brain becomes mush.
Yeah, it does become. It's like, and also it's funny because a lot of it is like cramming for a test. Like when the phone comes out, every single spec of every single lineup because you're going to be talking about it, and then after like 6 months, when you settle into a device that you're using or whatever, you kind of like that stuff fades away. And I'm like, wait, because someone asked me, because this phone has 200 megapixels. Someone's like, hey, how many megapixels does the iPhone have currently? And I was like, wait, I should know this. I'm like, 48, I think. And,
they're all,
because they just changed that, So I was like, because it used to be what, 12 or 16?
12, it's 12, 12 for like the longest time.
For many, many years. So
anyway. It's fun, but I like what Samsung is doing, and I feel like everyone will talk about it, but at least here in the US, the iPhone has so much power, has so much pull, so much marketing muscle. And Samsung still makes a great product. It's just the way that people like how they perceive it.
It's also like, don't discount the ecosystem. It's really
never.
I mean, honestly, if Apple made, and Apple knows this, there's two things that Apple is really, really good at, and that's the iMessage situation here in the US, at least. And also the Apple Watch, the idea that they don't let that work without an iPhone, you can't just like activate it on its own. Number one, I mean, yes, I know you can do the family setup thing for your kid, but like as an adult, like I want the best like fitness, sports watch, whatever, and that's the Apple Watch.
Yep.
Maybe I want to mix and match and just have the Apple Watch, but also have the new Ultra. You really can't do that easily. And I know some YouTubers will like, they have setups and this and that. Like, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of them hold like two phones in their pocket, but that's not realistic.
No, people don't do that. People don't do that. And every time you and I talk, the ecosystem comes up almost like half the time, because it is true. And it's understated. And you realize, look, you and I, even when we review phones, jumping over to the other ecosystem actually takes a little work.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It really does. And so it reminds you just how powerful it is. And ultimately, we want things to work and be easy to use. And that counts for something, because grandma taking her photo, grandma.
It always comes back to grandma. Look, you have to understand look, your audience is a little bit different than mine, because I'm on mainstream TV, which is, I call them drive-by techies, right? It's people that are watching the news. And then I come on and talk about tech stuff, which is like, oh, that's interesting. But they're not tuned in for that. Like if someone's coming to your YouTube channel, they've either done a search, or they're, a big fan of Brian Tong from back in the day, or they're just, doing their research, whatever. So there's a different audience there. And so I come from a perspective of like, I just get a lot of like everyday people that are like emailing and asking me these questions that throw me for a loop sometimes, because I'm like, oh, I didn't even really think about it from that aspect. And I love that, because it makes you realize there's so many different angles to this whole like tech world. And some of these tech companies get that and some of them don't. And so, you can't discount kind of the power of certain things that you may not think of in your world, but in other people's worlds, that's very important. Like whether it's price, whether it's the upgrade cycle, whether it's a promotion, whether it's how this thing works with their other device. I mean, there's so many considerations.
Yeah, I've always used my mom as the benchmark of like, when it hits my mom and she knows about it, okay, then it's really become mainstream. But until then, like, in our world, and I'm not here to judge it, but so many people talking crypto, hyping up crypto, becoming crypto experts. Now they are all silent. I hear crickets. And until my mom,
me. Have you seen the price of Bitcoin lately?
See, I've been so locked in. Did it blow up?
Yes.
Like
dude,
by what, like 30%?
Did
it just tell me what happened?
One month, 38%.
I was like, I mean, did it go up 30%?
But you're right. I mean, yes, everyone was so hyped on it while it was like up, 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 up. And then, of course, everyone just like stopped talking about it when it started going down. And now it's going up again. And people are, I think they're trying to keep quiet because they're like, I'm going to sell when this hits back to what I invested. So I don't want anyone to really.
Oh man, but hey, Rich, it's always
the crypto folks against us. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
you know. So, Rich, it was awesome hanging out. Thank you so much. You are the first official video guest. People wanted to see video. They're like, we just want video. I'm like, okay, then you're getting my bedroom with my Spawn toys and Rich's classy room in his house.
Yeah, this I just painted this room. And by the way, this video, I will tell you, we didn't mention this about the M2. The upgraded webcam is phenomenal compared to what it was before. So
I realized I should have used continuity. I should have used continuity camera. My phone. I'll do that next time. Next time we do it. Huh?
Yeah. It's too much work to do the continuity. I mean, it's cool, but it's so much easier just to use what's built in. But it's nice to have that option.
Yeah. We'll do it. I'll do it with you next time, Rich. We'll set it up. We'll be like, this is a continuity.
All right. And you're going to be on the radio show soon too.
Yes, so that's right. Yeah. I'll be there, my man. Always. So, okay, Rich. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, buddy.
All right, Brian. Take care.
All right, everybody. It is always fun, when we bring on guests, we can have some really good, engaging conversations just about what's happening. And it's always fun. Rich is a buddy of mine. We've known each other for years, so it's always cool when he comes on the show, and we will obviously have him back. Now, before we go, we got to give big thanks to our platinum apples at the $100 level: Brandon Ledford, Gil Cabrera, Wesley Frater, Jarrett Lewis, Michael Gigliotti, Atari Koenigsegg, and Glenn Canellis. Thank you so much for your support. And again, I say this every week. I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much to all of you who support at every level. You're the reason why I have been able to stay in the game and continue to do this, and I am so grateful. And it's up to me to keep on just bringing you the best content and the best perspectives and inside scoops that I possibly can. And I'd still love to hear what your thoughts are all about the HomePod. We're hearing a lot of things. Some people say it sounds better. Some people say it doesn't sound as good. Some people are like, it's great. And there's so many different users and where they stand with the smart home. I'm really curious to see how the HomePod is going to do. It's just for my personal situation. If you own 4 HomePods already, it's kind of hard to say, like, I got to get this one, at least right now. And if things change, and if they maybe change that computational audio and it sounds basically just as good, maybe it might convince me to jump over and try out a new one. But until then, we'll wait and see. So everybody, take care. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks for, out of all the first video versions of the podcast, it happened to be with not my highest quality camera, not with my DSLR, but in my bedroom in Cupertino, where really this all started. I mean, in fact, I'm going to show you something. Just ignore the fact that this is messy, but look here. See that Mac OS banner and the CRT TV that is still here because my parents use this as a room, but that's how old school I am. I'm so nerdy that I bought a banner from the retail store because I thought Mac OS 10 was the future of Apple, and it really did become, so much for them on the desktop platform. Then it's kind of, I have all types of random posters, trust me. So, all right, we're going to stop talking about that. We will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week, or we'll talk to you next week. Either one. I'll flip a coin. We'll see if we'll do a video again. But thanks so much for watching. It's the Apple Bitz XL, baby. Peace.